Welcome back, everybody. It is Tuesday, and that means another episode of Theater and Tech Trends. And presenting to you tonight, our wonderful viewers, our most magnificent people in the world, are Jiles, myself, and Digital Don AV. Digital Don, how are you, sir?
What's up, man?
Oh, it's the world's coming to an end.
Trying to hold my hand up here. Like I was gonna do it. I was like, little assist.
Right on.
Yeah, that's just my life now.
Right here. Well,
no neck brace. First time.
Welcome to the show, man. Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to see everybody, man.
Yeah, folks are popping in already. Mad Piranha. So tonight we have a wonderful show lined up. We have two awesome guests. Joining us first will be Jack Sharkey from KEF, KEF, and he's going to tell us all about that bass, all that bass, no trouble. Who did that song? I don't know who did that song. Somebody did that song. Anyway, and then following up for the second half of the show, we've got Rob from Epson, and he's going to tell us all about the mysteries of life and the way that Epson solves those mysteries. It's going to be enlightening, and I'm really looking forward to it. C-Big. What's up, Chucky? Chuck. All right. Don, if you're ready, I'm ready. I think we're going to go ahead and get this thing rolling.
Born ready.
All right. Bam! That's all I can say. We have the one, the only, the Jack Sharkey.
Attack.
And
gentlemen,
I have to preface everything, Jack, because you hold a special place in my heart.
Fabulous.
If you roll the clock back 5 or 6 years,
okay,
you were one of the first set of people to ever come on my live stream.
I was.
You were, and yeah. I will thank you every time we talk for that. Folks like you are what make this industry happen, and I appreciate all the support that you've given over the years. Thank you.
Well, and right back at you, because it's always, I look forward to the once or twice a year that I'm on the show with you, and even like tonight, we're just going to kind of talk about some fun things. We don't really have, I don't have anything new to offer tonight, but I've got some cool things to talk about, and I always just look forward to it. So I appreciate that, and thanks for having me. It's been about a minute since we've seen each other. I saw you in Charlotte last summer. Was the last time we spoke? Yeah,
that's right. Yep. And I'm not going to be there this summer. I have a conflict that I was going to say that I can't get out of. I could get out of it, but I really want to go to this other thing. So I have to pick and choose. Unfortunately, it's a Jiles nerd geek thing.
I'll be there, Jack. We can hang out.
Yeah,
I think I'll be there. Yeah, and we'll definitely spend some time and talk. And it's always good to see everybody. It's just, and we were talking earlier, it's a fun event. It's a fun way to spend a weekend. And yeah, so miss you this year, but I'm with you now, so that's what matters.
Absolutely. Quick hello to Mr. Abominous Black. There we go. Yep. And so Jack, now you've been on a number of times, but there might be some people out there that don't know you. So let's level set. Please tell everyone who you are, what you do, and why they should care.
I can't speak to why they should care, but what I can speak to is I've been with KEF for about 18 years or so, and I am an engineer by trade. I work in the marketing department. So I do training and content. I write the blog, and we'll go out and do the shows and things like that. So I kind of get to straddle both worlds, which is, the technical side of things and the marketing side of things. I'm based in Nashville. And of course, everybody knows that our US headquarters are up in New Jersey, where our KEF Music Lounge is and all. And that's me. I love what I do. I love the company, the folks, the products, the whole bit, and being able to, spend time talking about it is always a big thrill for me.
Right on. Well, again, welcome to the show. And I think we're going to just dive right in now. And what we're going to talk about today is a little bit of subwoofer history, right? And you're going to kind of run us through kind of the things that have happened in the past that folks might not understand or know about, and talk about the way that subwoofers went from there's no such thing to they're pretty darn important, right? So
right.
I'll leave it to you.
when you think about it, if we were doing this 15 years ago, maybe, or slightly longer ago than that, subwoofers would be like a really kind of niche kind of conversation, and they were just starting to get a foothold and all. And it's really in the last 10 to 15 years that they've exploded, and now they become just absolute must-haves. And even for 2-channel stereo, right? There was a big hold off for even maybe 5 years ago. There were still those like no subwoofer for me. No subwoofer. I want my 2-channel, and that's it. And of course, sub technology has grown, and our ability to get them integrated into the system has grown. And quite frankly, I was one of those holdouts with my 2-channel with music, because we grew up with smaller speakers, and bass was a bit different, particularly if you grew up listening to vinyl and whatnot. And now I sorely miss it. It takes a while to get it tuned in and get it tweaked right. And then once you do that, it's a thing. But in the 1980s, no one had subwoofers. It wasn't until the end of the 80s and 1990s when home integration, home theater started to happen, that, just the top end people, with the real expensive systems would have a subwoofer. We started launching our subs in the 1990s for our home theater, right? But if you go back even 10 years before that, live venues didn't really have a whole lot of subwoofer action going on. And it was Jamaican dance hall and disco clubs in Manhattan and all that sort of really kind of brought subs in. So, we're just 40 years or so, maybe a little bit longer than that, into the subwoofer thing. But in terms of your homes, we're only 10 or 15 years, which pulls it around to why, education about what a subwoofer does and how important it is, and how to integrate it to me is so important, because you don't want to get that big one note boomy bass where that's all you're getting. Listen, I love when it hits me in the chest as much as the next person, but it's just like anything else, everything in moderation, right?
Accurate bass.
Yeah. And that's why I think, education and talking about like what a subwoofer actually does other than make the big boom is so important, and something that I'm spending a lot of time talking about.
I'm as we go through, I'm looking through your notes that you provided, and one of the things that you pointed out in your notes is that until the late 1950s, the lowest usable frequency was around 100-ish hertz.
Yeah,
that seems ridiculously
Isn't that
high.
crazy? When you think like an acoustic kick drum, like
Is that when Bose was designed? No, I'm sorry.
You mean Macintosh?
Sorry,
I'm just going to jump right on. Like a acoustic kick drum comes in between 60 and 80 hertz.
Yeah.
So even that big, bass boom was not something that technically we could manage. We couldn't reproduce it until well into the end of the 1950s, which when I first ran across that, that's an amazing statistic. So now you're only 60 years or a little bit more hearing below 100 hertz, for crying out loud.
That's crazy. Right on. And then let's see. Said your notes say that subwoofers were being played with in the 60s, right? And the first sub used in a mix session was 1973's Pretzel Logic by Steely Dan.
Yeah, isn't that cool? It's still considered one of the great audiophile albums of all time, and that's the first time. And it was an experimental sub. It wasn't an off the line product. It was something that a guy had built that went on to become part of another company, and so on and so forth. I don't remember all the details that much, but they just brought it into the studio one day just to try it out. And the mix of that record speaks for itself. But think about all the other albums that we probably still listen to today. Up until that time, no subwoofer, just it was not there. So I always find that to be really interesting, because people can't listen to music without, or even certainly watch movies, but can't listen to music without a subwoofer at this point, me included.
Yeah. Okay, here's a question, right? And I've had a number of people ask me this, and I'm just gonna, this is like stream of consciousness stuff, right? But as subwoofer design has become more sophisticated, right? And I can't count the number of times that I've been at a high end 2 channel show and had people scoff about subs. But anyway, um, do you feel that there is a relevance and importance to the concept of stereo subwoofers? And what I mean by that is 2 channel system, left and right, left channel crossover, mids and highs to whatever your speaker is, left channel subwoofer information under whatever the crossover is to that sub. And then on the right side, the same thing. So not summed and crossover like you do in like a home theater situation, right? But
yeah, do it your
true.
pre-out.
You're right. No, is there value in that?
Well, it's a matter of diminishing returns at this point, right? So bass, so just to talk about when we were saying bass for today, we're talking below 60 hertz. We're talking about deep bass, 40 hertz, 30 hertz.
Right.
It is absolutely directional. When you think about it, if you hear a thunderstorm, when you're outside, if you're on the golf course or you're at the supermarket, or whatever, where that thunderstorm is coming from.
Oh yeah, I can feel it came from over there. Yeah,
it came from over there. So I'm going to go this way, right?
Yeah.
So, but now when you get into your room, maybe you're not going to be able to set those waves up in your room to really get steering bass. But it is absolutely a thing. And in a well-tuned system, it actually can make a difference. And here's something else that people don't think about. It's what the sub does to support the main speaker that is often forgotten about, right? It's letting the main speaker work just a little bit less, right? So there's less distortion, there's more output. There's harmonics involved. That's why you want to get your sub locked in and tuned properly, so it doesn't blow out things in the upper, mid range or in the middle range. With 300 hertz, you'd be surprised if you do a demo of when that sub's loud. You listen to speakers to frequencies above the sub frequencies, and then you start getting that thing tuned in. They start to jump out. So that would also mean for stereo subs, now you're going to get that dual benefit, right, per channel on each speaker. So the answer to your question is, yeah, absolutely, man. But the sub answer to that question is it's a matter of diminishing returns. So obviously the higher in sophistication your system is, the more you're going to hear that. For me, I'm running 2 mono subs in my room because my room, it sounds really good, but it just isn't. It's not big enough, and I'm just don't have the room to do that. So it's kind of a mixed bag answer, but that's how I feel about it.
I think matching your sub, having a sub that's appropriate for the kind of speakers that you have, high performance, preferably sealed for a 2-channel system, in my opinion. But really crossing, I always run my systems large, my main speakers on a 2-channel system. I don't use it unless I got a piece I'm, testing or reviewing. And then I'll put the sub in and cross it over, say like 50 hertz, kind of on the lower side. And then pay a ton of attention to phasing, getting in phase and positioning it so we don't get the group delay and, some of the things that really affect the sound. And even with one sub, running the left and right outs to like an integrated amp or a preamp, or even a whatever source that you have, into the left and right inputs on a sub. Even always preferable to have 2 subs, but you can get away with 1 sub in that particular case. So I've had a lot of luck with it.
And for so many reasons, when you think about it, like even having 2 subs, I'm running 2 KC62s in my room and they're tucked inside because form became a little bit more important than function in my room right now, right? So, we had the subs set up, and then outside of the subs are my R5s, and incidentally, I'm crossing my R5s over at 40 hertz.
Okay.
Perfectly. There you go. Perfectly happy with them, which is also something I wanted to talk about. That 80 hertz number, is we talk about that a little bit. But even having my 2 subs, I have them slightly asymmetric, right? So they're not exactly 90 degrees off of each other. They're not exactly parallel. And then, so what I'm doing theoretically, and of course I did the sub crawl and I listened to the room, is I'm defeating any standing waves that might happen. Standing waves that could make the sound be artificially high, which to me is actually more annoying sometimes when it just jumps out at you. It's too much bass. And then certainly, where you have artificial attenuation, where you're missing things. Like if you and I were sitting next to each other and, I'm getting a full wallop of bass and you're completely missing certain frequencies.
Yep.
That's how you can kind of adjust those subs with two, just a little bit asymmetric. And like I said, in a room, even where form is more important than function, because the aesthetic was really more of a key. So that was a good workaround. So there are so many different things. You spoke about group delay and all those things. They're just speakers. That's all they are. But low frequencies, because of the size of the waves and all, they're tricky. A lot of work.
They're very tricky. Yeah. And some people, even on surround systems, don't EQ above 300 hertz, 400 hertz. I don't necessarily believe in that, especially for a multi-channel system. But yeah, subs are definitely, and most of your auto calibration systems, like ARC and, basic Dirac and whatnot, really focus on below the transitional frequencies anyways, because getting that right, in my opinion, is a lot easier, or a lot harder than getting the main speakers right. And that's important, position, yada, yada, yada. But yeah, subs are the magic. But when you do get them dialed in, I don't care what you own. I've got a pair of some of the most powerful tower speakers, dual 12s, 2400 watts to the 12s, monster, 62 inches tall. They sound better with subs.
Yeah.
They sound good.
Yeah. And people don't take into account what the subwoofer can do to the lower mid-range of, if it's maybe it's a little too high, it's a little too low. Obviously you want to offload the speakers a little bit and kind of help them out. But even a half decibel too high, you can start muddling up some frequencies that you would never think would be related to a subwoofer, because it will have that effect because of harmonics and stuff. So, this is why this is what I love talking about. And we're talking about subwoofers, right? Obviously, I love my KEF subwoofers, and if I didn't work for the company, they're still coming with me, right? Yeah, but it just sub bass in general can be very tricky. Yeah.
How many hours have you spent messing with it as an engineer? I know I've spent like half a lifetime just driving my girlfriend crazy. Did you hear that?
One product that, and I think, Don, you're going to appreciate this too. And some people, I'm about to move into heresy land for some two channelers, right? The new preamp from Indie Audio Labs, they're accurate, or they're Aragon. What is it? Tungsten? Is it the tungsten?
And it is a masterpiece, not only in construction and sound quality, but features and form.
And that's what I want to talk about, the features. So for bass, right? So a lot of people think about this, and when they hear this, they're like, oh, that's like a home theater AVR kind of thing. But, they have their room correction technology built in. And, for 2-channel, they, do all the crossover, and they can, do all of the room and multiple subwoofer kind of stuff out of a 2-channel pre-pro, right?
Well, I think Jack's familiar with that technology. Isn't awesome. That in your show theater? Is an Acurus power?
Oh, yeah, the Act 4. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
That technology is great.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. But also what I think is important for people to remember, for consumers, remember that, the high end stuff is awesome. And the higher tech stuff is awesome, but just taking the time with a good set of ears, or not even, just training your ears to pay attention. You don't have to have all those things. You can lock in a great sound just with a little bit of patience and a little bit of time too. And what I find when I talk to people at shows and stuff, people who are not full-time hobbyists, or who are really not into, they just want to have a good system, whatever, they get really intimidated really quickly. And if you were to listen to this conversation the three of us just had, you could kind of go like, I can kind of see why.
There's a
right?
lot. Yeah.
But I think it's important to understand that, listen, sub bass is for everybody. It's just a matter of how you get there,
Right on. So let's go back to that 80 hertz thing that you were talking about, right? So, everybody always says, oh, cross them over at 80, cross them over at 80. Where does that come from, and why, how do you get out of that kind of?
So back in the day, 1983 or 84, when THX became a thing, and all, the names are just completely
Common.
Yeah. technology wasn't as sophisticated as it was today, and they were looking for a really good happy medium. Where's a good spot that we can tell everybody we're gonna set it from here? So 80 hertz wound up being sort of the default. But as we've moved forward over the past 40 plus years, we as an industry have learned a lot more about sub bass and how rooms react and how important a room is. So, my 80 hertz might be your 60 hertz or might be your 40 hertz. And what I try to do is have consumers know, start at 80. That's fine. That's fine. But play with it. Don't lock into it and just go, well, 80 hertz is what the book said, and that's where I'm going to go. Don't be afraid to go low. Don't be afraid to go high, depending on your speakers, right?
Especially with modern speakers. Everybody was THX crazy in the 90s and early 2000s. So those speakers really started to roll off hard, below 50 hertz. And, or below 80 hertz, really, a lot of them.
When you think about it, you would think far back, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But now you're seeing speakers roll off more in the 50 hertz region. So you can get a little, I don't necessarily hear bass from my sides and my rears, but I'd like to have a little more oomph on there myself.
Yeah. And having the ability to, when we go back to steering it, right? When you've got it locked in and you've got a good crossover, this a good crossover point is what I'm trying to say. You can also then help the mains do more steering in a smaller room where those sub frequencies haven't set up in length to really be able to tell where they're coming from. So you can hear from me, I'm going back constantly to that integration point. And it is two things. It's where's the crossover set and what works best for your speakers and for your room and also for your ears. Just because I like something a certain way doesn't mean it's the exact way that it should be. You might have a different way to listen to it. But then the other thing that we sometimes forget to pay attention to is volume integration, right? Is actual the depth of volume, because you just spent a lot of money on your subwoofer and you get it home and then, somebody comes in and sets it up for you and go like, yeah, it only fires every once in a while because that's what it's supposed to do. And that's no good. I just spent $1,000 on a subwoofer.
Amen.
Turn it up. Turn it up.
That's right.
So as an integrator, let me just tell you what every single person that gets a theater and it's calibrated to the T's and it's supposed to be where it's, perfectly linear. They're like, can you turn the surrounds up and can you turn the subs up every time? Yeah. Or video calibration. It's kind of dark.
And it's real simple. You spent a lot of coin to get some product in your house, and the way that they're supposed to work. They're there. You don't really hear them. So, like, if you hear where your sub is coming from, it's probably too loud, right? I mean, that's a real good base. If you can, when you're listening to music, if your eyes go to the sub when you hear some bass, or your brain goes to the sub, you can almost assume it's a little bit too loud. On the other side of the coin, I just spent $2,000 on a subwoofer, or two subwoofers, or whatever it is, and I want to hear more than that. So you got to kind of get over that hump and kind of bring them in. And always keep in mind that once they're integrated properly for music or for movies, there is no sweeter experience than having a perfectly integrated sub that's locked in with your speakers, both at crossover and at volume.
Magic. No matter what level it is. Just one quick funny note. There's a few integrators that may or may not have to set the processor to all channel stereo and left. Now they hear the surrounds.
Oops. We have a KEF fan out there. Big Jack 79 says he runs KEF reference in walls, and they're his favorite speaker by far. But he is a DIY subwoofer guy.
Listen, as long as he's enjoying them, I think that's isn't that really the point at the end of the day?
Yeah, I would love to see Big Jack 79's DIY subwoofers. I'd love to see
me too, actually.
I love that kind of stuff. And, folks know that I've done a number of DIY build videos showing how, I've built different subwoofers from time to time. And I think I'm at the point now where I enjoy watching other people do the building more than actually doing it myself. That's a young man's game. I say that as I have in the garage right now, I've got a Stereo Integrity 24-inch subwoofer, and I can't even move the crate that it's in by myself. The raw driver, right? No box.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, driver.
Yeah, I mean it. Yeah, so that'll be a project for this summer, which it might be the one that kills me, finally puts me over the hump. But
but you'll go out happy. So I mean, that's okay.
Yeah,
you know,
I've made space where it's going to go. There used to be a different subwoofer there. It is now gone. And there's a large open hole in my room that will be.
Don't you have the Guggenheim Museum display of subwoofers through history in your room?
At
9 different kinds.
At different points in time, I've had quite a number of them. Yeah. So, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. Everybody keep your eyes peeled for that one. Like and subscribe so you'll be notified.
Yeah, that one. Certainly send me a heads up when that one's going to air, because I absolutely going to tune in on that one. Yeah.
What I really want to do. So I'm actually going to have the box all done and completed, and I'm going to bring the driver and the box downstairs separately, because it's like going to be probably 400 pounds or something altogether. I mean, it's a massive beast. But to drop the driver in, usually I would, I'll put like little zip ties through the holes, and me and somebody else will lower the subwoofer in, and then you cut them, and hopefully you can pull them out, and then the sub will seat, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking about
without turning, so you can't get the screw in.
Exactly right. And for this one, I'm going to use what are the inserts, and then the metal machine screws that go into it. I forget what they're called, but you instead of just wood screws that go into the wood, you actually drill a hole and put a little fitting on the backside, and then you can put machine screws through that. And it's like metal on metal, and once you're
just hope they work.
Yeah. There's like no going back, right?
Right.
If they break and the screw spins, you're just,
it's a one-take shot. That's it. Yeah.
But I'm gonna try that. But what I really need is like a engine jack, that thing that's got like legs, and then you put it over the front of your car, and then you put that thing. I need one of those to put in the basement, which would probably be 300 pounds by itself just to get it down there.
Yeah, that's your episode right there. It's not necessarily the listening to this; it's how you use the engine hoist to get it in there and set it in the whole bit. That's your episode.
Here's another thing that I thought would be super cool. If you've ever seen like manufacturing facilities, and they have these like eye bars across the ceiling, and then they have like the chains and this thing, they can slide it all around the room and move stuff that way. I would put one of those in and just be able to just move subwoofers through the room with that thing.
By all means, I highly encourage that. That's what you do. Yeah, I'm all for that. I support your efforts on that one.
All right. Okay. All right. As typical, time flies when you're having fun, and we're right here at the half hour. So, Jack, I'm going to ask you for a couple of minutes of closing thoughts for folks out there, about subwoofers or KEF or anything in general, or, where can they meet you at if they want to say hi to the Jack in person?
Well, Audio Advice Live, I should be out there, and from time to time, I don't really have much of a show schedule at this point, but it would be great to see everybody out there. And, I guess just in closing, to keep it as brief as possible, we've been doing this for 63 years. We have engineers full-time. There are guys. We have PhD physicists and stuff working on our speaker technology. And if you dig what we've done speaker technology-wise, absolutely give our subwoofers a shot, because it's the same kind of technological thinking and envelope pushing that goes into our other speakers, because subwoofers are just speakers. KC62 and the KC92. I misspoke before. I have KC92s.
Okay, I was going to say you got to have the 92s.
I have the 92s. I misspoke. But our Cube MIE series and stuff. We're full in. We've been full in for a lot of years, but we've got a product line now that fits in really well, not just with KEF speakers, but with whatever you've got. So, I'd like to, if I can leave with anything, is that when you're in the market, you're looking for a sub, give us a check and see. I think you'd be pretty happy.
I think what would be really cool is like 2 triple stacks of the KC92s.
Come on, bro.
I don't have room, but I will tell you, I did a couple of installs with triple stacks. unbelievable, just so sublime, because you're getting so much more power, but the speakers, because of the coupling, they're not working, the subs are not working quite as hard.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole nother episode to talk about the stacking kit.
Yeah, I would love to find somebody that's got a triple stack, 2 triple stacks left, right of the 92 somewhere.
Yeah.
That. I've never heard it, but I think that'd be cool.
We built a theater in Los Angeles for a movie premiere, and I engineered it, and we had blades with triple stacks next to it.
Oh my God, you're talking my language.
I'm looking at the clock. I know we're getting late. That's another episode for sure.
Okay, all right. So Jack, let's put a pin in that one. And if you can find a picture of those blades in the triple stack or something, because if I were going to choose a system, that would be one of the systems that I would choose. That would be what? Yeah.
We'll have an email thing. That's a 10-minute, 15-minute stop in. I'd love to do that because it was really something very, very cool. So,
okay, cool. All right. Well, Jack, thank you so much for joining. As always, a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you whenever the next time I see you is. It won't be at Audio Advice, but I'll see you then.
It'll be this year. Jiles, Don, really a pleasure. Thanks so much. Have a great night, guys.
All right, Jack. All right. Thank you.
All right. So
love Jack.
Jack's the best. Like I said, he's been with me since the beginning.
Kind to everybody. Yeah,
he is a good dude. He was one of the very first people to support me, and I'll never forget that. Now we are going to move from audio to video, and I have a local, I don't know how you even say it, Coloradian. So anyway, Rob from Epson is going to be joining us, and he's going to be here right now. Rob, welcome.
Hey, Jiles, a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited.
Yeah, man, I'm so thankful that you're here on the show with us tonight. And we're going to talk about some stuff that's kind of game changing that you guys have brought to market not too long ago. But first, for the folks that don't know you, please let everyone know who you are, what you do, and why they should care.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Rob Brennan. I am the technical account manager with Epson, specifically supporting what we call the kind of premium residential projector business. I've been in the industry since 2011, about mid-2011, so coming up on 14 years. I was with the teams that developed, the very beginning of 4K in terms of 4K projection, 4K television. I was around for kind of the launch and adoption of HDR. I won't share the story now, but very interesting conversations at the time with the president of 20th Century Fox, who asked me to justify to him whether or not HDR was a good thing, which really blew my mind.
Wow!
Considering I thought it was his fault, the reason we were doing it. But at heart, I'm a projector enthusiast. I've supported and multiple vendors, multiple manufacturers with display technologies and audio. And at the end of the day, projection is really where kind of my heart lies. And so I've had an opportunity a while back to join the Epson team, specifically as Epson launched a new series of high brightness, kind of premium residential projectors that I feel really changed the projector landscape. And we can talk more about what those changes are and kind of what the technology and the new benefits are moving forward. But I'm just thrilled to be here. I know that you're local, so hopefully one of these days we'll get together in person and I'll hang out in your garage, help you move some stuff around. Come to my basement where I have 8 projectors on a cart I wheel around just to do various testing.
Do you have a QL7000 at your place?
I do. I have a QL7000, the 3000, QB. All the competitive models, too many to list.
Dude, absolutely. One day I should come over and we should just do a video and you can talk about your stuff. And that would be awesome. I'd love to do that. And it's super easy because you're here. I think Epson should actually relocate everyone to Castle Rock. That should be
convenient, right?
Yeah. I mean, for you guys, it would be convenient because you're all right. Okay. So let's talk about these 3 models. So there are 3 newish Q series, right? There's the QB1000, QL3000, QL7000, and maybe you could just tell people a little bit about what's going on and what some of that special sauce is real quick.
Sure. At the end of the day, I think projection has needed a serious evolution, potentially even a revolution now for quite some time. And Epson is uniquely positioned because we have all this experience in the commercial side of the business, essentially, high brightness, flexible installation, et cetera. And so the idea a couple of years ago was, how do we take the high brightness performance that we've developed for commercial projection, but tune it for residential application. In the past, a customer may end up purchasing a commercial projector if they have like a barn dominium build.
Right.
And that's great. It's high brightness, but it's not really tuned for, watching video. And it's certainly not tuned for HDR video. And so this was the idea for the Q series. How do you take high brightness and develop a projector with premium picture quality with an emphasis on HDR, but you need to maintain a compact and quiet chassis to eliminate some of the installation, let's say pitfalls that may prevent someone from adopting a projector in the first place. And that's what Q series is. So as you pointed out, there are 3 models in the line. The QB1000 is an integrated lens projector, so very similar to projectors that Epson has brought to the market in the past for the residential space.
Right.
As a matter of fact, if any of the viewers here are familiar with Epson's LS12000, which came out about 3 years ago, it's the same chassis. So same physical dimensions, same lens, just souped up performance. So increase the brightness output, improve the black level performance. So just overall an enhanced kind of premium integrated lens projector. But where things get really interesting is in the new QL models. And as you pointed out, there are 2. There's a QL3000, which is a 6,000 lumen projector, and a QL7000, which is 10,000 lumens. And what you get with these projectors first is an interchangeable lens chassis, which solves a lot of kind of room geometry issues. So there's about a dozen lenses that are compatible with either of those chassis, from ultra short, which typically you might see in even like a rear pro application, to very long throw. So if you have a great room or a very large space and you want to be able to project from one end of the space to the other, Epson has those solutions. But what also makes Epson unique, and this has been true for many years, quite frankly, is the lumen per dollar kind of value that Epson brings to the market. So for example, 10,000 lumens typically would cost in a 6-figure kind of range. And make no mistake, those are amazing projectors. If you have the means, I certainly would not turn my nose up at you or wag my finger if you chose to go with one of the solutions. They're incredible. But Epson can deliver that kind of performance at about 1/3 of that price. So more customers can access that kind of performance and the flexibility that it brings. And so that's really the change that we've been able to bring to the market. It's higher brightness for different and more interesting applications, and better performance, especially for HDR.
Hey, Rob, can I throw a couple things in, just expand on what you're saying? And this is from an integrator standpoint, somebody who's done thousands of projectors over the years. One reason we always really liked Epson, besides the excellent picture quality, usually from the ground up, and the high brightness, and move into what we really like, is the reliability. Being a commercial projector maker, it seems like all the Epson projectors have always been super reliable for us. Expanded discrete codes where you can do things like invert the picture and stuff that you don't get in your JVCs and your Sonys and whatnot. They have some, but not as many as you always provide. And really flexibility on, throw distance and positioning of the projector. Nothing I found is more flexible than an Epson projector. And, these are things that everybody should know.
And I think, Don, you bring up a good point. A lot of that is derived from the kind of commercial experience,
right?
Where, again, projector, the reliability has got to be through the roof, especially if it's in a ballroom and it's, 40 feet in the air, and you're charging, tens of thousands of dollars for, some company, some event to come in and rent that space.
Correct.
The system just has to work. So we've benefited from that kind of engineering and manufacturing refinement into the residential side.
Yeah, which is very cool. But the installation flexibility saved my ass a few times, trust me. But people know that you got a tough situation,
and it is something that I think is quite helpful, especially from an integrator standpoint, because most projectors in this class are typically sold through resellers, through integrators, through design houses. They're not typically off the shelf
DIY,
products. And so if the integrators and the installers and the design firms don't have confidence in the product, if they're worried about having to roll a support truck out to their client's house every 3 weeks, then that's just not a product that they want to end up supporting, because it becomes too much of a pain.
Those are really questions more people should ask before they invest $5, $10, $15, $20, $50, whatever $1,000. Just don't Google just on the picture quality. Take into consideration all these other features, because if it's even close in picture quality, you'll be happy with it, because you're not going to have another projector right next to it. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but protect your investment, protect your money.
Well, in my experience, if your display is going to go down, it's going to go down Thanksgiving afternoon or Christmas morning. Those are your two kind of black pits of despair when it comes to having to call your dealer up and say, you need to roll a truck out here. Uncle Jimmy played with my settings and nothing works anymore.
So I want to talk a little bit about brightness, right? Lumens, and how does this really combine and play in HDR world, right? Because if you can talk with a lot of folks and they're like, oh, projectors just they'll never be bright enough, and HDR, you can't really do anything HDR with projectors. That's kind of the old school kind of philosophy. And I'm curious where Epson has taken things at, and what does 10,000 lumens of color brightness really get you? I mean, how can people understand what that means?
That's a fantastic question. So let me answer it in two parts. First, with HDR, I couldn't agree with you more. As a matter of fact, for the last 10 years, I've been personally recommending to end users who own projectors, to calibrators, to dealers, to do yourself a favor, and I recommend disabling HDR in your brand new projector that you just brought, that you just purchased.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations on it, especially if it's your first projector. Welcome to the correct side. You'll love it.
Right.
But HDR is a challenge when it comes to viewing on a projected image, and that simply has to do with the relatively limited dynamic range that's been associated with projection for a long time. When you think about, I'll give you one more kind of explanation for this. When you think about the history of HDR, this goes back about 10 years. Televisions back before kind of HDR world were maybe a couple hundred nits of brightness.
Mm-hmm.
And we fast forward 10 years, and it's not difficult to purchase a television that's 3,000 nits. So that's a significant increase in brightness over this period of time. Mm-hmm. But if we think about kind of a typical, very popular projector from 10 years ago was maybe 1,500 lumens. Today, that projector might be 2,000. Very marginal increase in brightness, right. Which has not simply kept up with the requirements for HDR video. The other common kind of conception that I run into quite a bit, and this is not just with consumers, but I've had this discussion with Hollywood colorists that struggle with understanding the difference between HDR and SDR. And I'll explain this as quickly as I can. But essentially with HDR, this is what we refer to as an absolute contrast kind of strategy. Zero, black is equal to zero at all times, mm-hmm. right? And so depending on the brightness of your display, your dynamic range only essentially goes up. So when you take let's say a piece of content graded at 1,000 nits, so it's this, but your display can only do this. Your average picture level just moved down. Everything got compressed. And so you end up with a darker HDR image than SDR. The opposite is true with television, however, because TV manufacturers, when you're watching SDR, they basically dim the TV down. And when you switch over to an HDR signal, they allow the brightness to ramp up to max. So your average picture level goes up in a TV. So we associate HDR from a TV standpoint with brighter images, more color information, a more engaging and exciting image. And then we go to sit down in front of our projector because we want a large immersive experience, but the opposite happens. The average picture level drops, the color becomes compressed, the image becomes kind of dim and dingy. The solution is you need projectors to be much brighter. The other things that brightness solves for us is quite frankly something else that's happened over the last 10 years. a 65-inch TV used to be the biggest TV you could buy. But
Yes.
I can go down to my local club, retailer, and I can pick up a 98-inch TV today for a fraction of what a 65-inch TV used to cost. And so again, 10 years ago, 1,500 lumens maybe lit up a 100-inch screen. And that was significantly larger than your 65-inch TV. So that was enough. We didn't need more brightness. But today, when I can buy a 100-inch TV like this, if I want projectors to be more immersive, I need to be 130, 140, 150 inches. And I need much more brightness to make that happen. And so these multiple changes over the last 10 years that have kind of coincided with HDR have led to projectors needing to have a change to maintain their kind of immersive advantage over television,
Right.
not only from size, but from visual stimulation and impact.
And you guys have delivered on that in spades, right? I mean, the brightness, 10,000 lumens out of a projector for, the price, and people can go look and see what the QL7000 costs. It's not cheap, but it's not a Christie cost, right?
I've
It's,
been putting in the Sony, for
Wow.
with 10,000 lumens for 80 grand,
yeah, I mean, that's a fraction of that price.
Right. And again, there's that particular model, the Sony, the GTZ380, it's a phenomenal projector, right? But in addition to being limited because of its price, it's also quite large. It's quite loud, all things considered. It runs fairly hot. And so you have, from a design and integration kind of point of view, you have to solve these other things. And there are customers that are perfectly willing to solve those. It just is a smaller and smaller percentage of people that are willing to do that. And so what was important to Epson is to say, okay, 10,000 lumens, that's cost of entry. It also needs to be compact. So it's 24 inches by 24 inches, and it's 7.5 inches tall.
Do you have to do 240 power to that?
And standard power. So, 110 power.
Really?
Yeah. So standard 110.
For the Sony to get 10,000 lumens, you got to do 240.
You got to do 220.
Or
right.
220.
And so it was important for Epson to be able to solve these other challenges that integrators and quite frankly, consumers have with high brightness projector. So Jiles, you asked the question, what could you do with 10,000 lumens?
What does that mean to an end user, right? How can they understand it? And maybe you can talk about that, and then maybe kind of put it in the context of how that relates to what a nit is in TV world, right?
I love the formulas. So there's formulas that you can calculate all this. But first, let me talk about what 10,000 nits enables you to do.
Or lumens.
10,000 lumens. Thank you. Now my brain is correct. Yeah. Recently, we had a 10,000 lumen projector installed. So a QL7000 was installed at a house in Florida on the Intercoastal. So this is a home with floor-to-ceiling windows, and this is in their living room. And they have a motorized screen that drops down in front of the windows. So the idea is, when they don't want to watch content, they're looking at the view that they paid a lot of money for, right? And at the click of a button, the screen comes down, and now they can watch whatever they want to watch, and they don't need a dedicated space that's painted black or gray or earth tones. You don't need to darken out that room. But you can have the technology kind of conform to the lifestyle. So that's like the extreme example of what you can do. You can turn these very non-traditional spaces into projection spaces where you get the immersive experience, but also something a TV or a video wall can't do is go away when you don't want to watch it. That's something that's unique to projection. So that's an example of how this works. Going back to your question about nits and how it relates to lumens. One of the other challenges with HDR has been that since its adoption, there has not been a kind of standard or target for HDR for home projection. It just hasn't existed. So a lot of individual theories have come up, and integrators and calibrators may have their own preference for what they should shoot for, but there's not been a consensus within the industry what makes good HDR. That changed in February this last year. So the DCI, which essentially is a working group of movie studios that get together and talk about what the standards are going to be that Hollywood is going to adopt, from film production, film distribution, and then film exhibition. What they're calling for is 299.6, but I hate decimals. So we're going to call it 300 nits plus or minus 30 nits is their recommendation for HDR. So when you think about what a 10,000 lumen projector could do, if I paired that with a screen material that used a positive gain, let's say a 1.3, which is fairly common for multiple manufacturers, a 1.3 gain material, I could illuminate a screen that's 224 inches at 300 nits. No one confuses this with a TV, right? You motorize this down and, you invite your neighbor over, the neighbor you don't like very much, and you're just trying to rub their face in it. And that's not something that they can easily replicate. By comparison, if you take the 2000 lumen projector that we've basically grown accustomed to kind of having to use in many cases, and I want to hit this new standard of 300 nits, and I'm using the same 1.3 gain screen, 100 inches is my maximum screen size, which happens to be the same size as a TV. So it kind of defeats the purpose of trying to do impactful HDR without that key in brightness. And again, Epson's uniquely positioned to be able to do this because, I'll say this as non-snarkily as possible. Epson ain't afraid of brightness. That brightness is something that Epson has absolutely, adopted and wrapped our arms around on the commercial side. It really just became a question of, let's tune it. Let's get the picture quality to kind of wrap around the brightness so that we can achieve the kind of viewing experience that, someone in their home is looking for and not what a business expects in a ballroom.
Right. So tell me if I am saying this correctly, right? Because I have this question posed to me quite often because people just, when they hear nit and they hear lumen, they don't know how to put these two together. So
sure.
The lumen describes the amount of light that exits the projector, right? A nit is a measure of brightness that is on a screen, right? So the relationship between the amount of lumens that comes out and how it translates into nits depends on how big the screen is, because a nit is a measure of brightness or light per area. And then the screen material will also be impactful on how many nits you get. So your screen, 1.3 gain or whatever it is, then associated with the size of the screen will determine how many nits you get off of a projector that's throwing out so many lumens of light. And then there has to be math.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Sorry.
Yeah. So the reason if there are some hardcore projector enthusiasts, they might be cringing every time I say nits because they're thinking you should be saying foot lamberts. Where are the foot lamberts?
Foot lamberts.
Right.
Yeah.
And the reason I choose to use nits is because as kind of an industry from a Hollywood, from a content production, nits is the word we have all kind of accepted to use.
Yeah.
But your description is correct. So the way that we would calculate this is that we would say lumens, so the output of the projector, divided by the surface area of the screen, multiplied the gain, or basically the reflective function of the screen itself, gives you, if you've done it in square feet, it gives you foot lamberts. And if you've done it in square meters, it gives you candescents per square meter, which we just abbreviate as nits.
Right.
And so that's the relationship. Something else that's really interesting is there is a lot of confusion about nits as it relates to size. So when you think about this, right, here's something to noodle your brain. A 65-inch TV is just shy of 1 square meter. So if you have a 65-inch TV and you take a spectroradiometer and you take a measurement and it says, I'm 1,000 nits, that means that the measurement is 1,000 nits, but also the total illumination that panel produces is about 1,000 candescents. But if you go to a 135-inch projected image, that's 4 square meters. If you measured 1,000 nits on that screen, it would be 4 times brighter in terms of total illumination.
Right.
So as you get larger, you don't actually need to maintain the same requirements as a TV. So there's a 3,000 nit TV. God help you if you sit down in front of a 200-inch, video wall or projected image and look at 3,000 nits. Your eyeballs will be blown out the back of your head.
So I did that. So Sony had their humongous 200-inch crystal LED wall thing, and I thought I was going to go blind.
Yeah, 220 nits, 220 inches at 1,000 nits. It's an eyeful, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it was important, for DCI to come out and say, hey, here's a number. This we've taken into consideration, what the directors are kind of talking about, from creative intent and what the technology supports and the size of the screens. And 299.6 is going to give us the type of viewing experience that kind of HDR requires. So it's quite helpful now that we have a guiding principle.
That's cool. That is HDR. Really nice. So we're going to run out of time here pretty soon, but what I would like to ask you to do now is to put on your fortune teller hat and tell us, when you look to the future, where you can see where we are now. We're at 10,000 lumens, for about $30,000. What does the future hold for projection in the home theater kind of arena? And maybe we could qualify that a bit and say, not for like the ultra wealthy, but for the high-end enthusiast, somebody that's going to drop, 50 grand on their system all in or something like that, or maybe 100,000 all in, but not the $5 million system. So what's the next thing? What's going to happen?
It's an excellent question. So I will put on my fortune teller hat and
that's
not
right.
the
special hat.
What Epson is planning kind of hat, that's a different kind of meeting.
Yes.
But it's interesting. I've had this conversation before as it relates, to TV, and I think a couple of things, need to happen. Certainly we need to really have this conversation about appropriate HDR viewing experience. The other thing that needs to happen is, quite frankly, this. Not everyone has a dedicated space that they can convert into a theater, but this theatrical viewing experience is so amazing, for customers. If you've never had an opportunity to watch a, projector at home, I would highly encourage you to find, that opportunity, because it will change you. It changed me completely. And so one of the things that we need to be looking at is, how do we take, video for projector, which is always assumed to be in a dark room. So even something as simple as how we measure contrast always assumes, an ambient condition. And how do we interpret that so we can move it into an environment that maybe has over 70 lux of ambient light, or 100 lux, like a typical living room might have 100 lux of ambient light, so we can have the viewing experience there. The other thing that we need to really be talking about is continued flexibility and ease of use, right? The younger generation that, in a couple of years is going to be kind of the main buyers of technology, for everyone's type of technology, is a generation that has grown up with smartphones. So what I mean by that is they've grown up with a device that's intuitive, that's easy to use, that's simple, where the user experience is really at the forethought, right, of the product itself. Not just the quality of the device, but the user experience has to be top notch. We have to build projectors and build video technologies in general with an understanding that if we're only talking, to the hardcore nerds, and I say that with love, by the way, we can't be gatekeepers to this kind of technology. Yeah, 100%. I got the tattoo on my back. Yeah. We've got to build technologies and solutions that are easily adoptable by a generation of people that are simply used to things just working. And being intuitive to provide an amazing experience.
That's awesome. Okay, this puts me off on a complete tangent, but one thing you said kind of really resonated. So my son, he's 16, and he did a review video for my channel, right? So I was so proud my boy did a review video of a portable wireless television. So it's a little TV battery, right? Little tiny kind of 24-inch thing, right? And what I thought was interesting, that kind of ties into what you said, in his head, the first thing that he compared this television to was his cell phone, right? And I would not have gone there and thought to myself, okay, I'm going to review this portable television. How do I put this in context? His context was, well, when I set this on a table and I sit back, it's about the same size, apparently, to me as my cell phone when I hold it here. So why would I want to buy this when I can just use my cell phone and it's about the same experience, and even the sound is about the same, right? You're right. It's all about the user, their experience, their context, and how it's relevant to them. So it's an interesting world we live in.
Something that you brought up, in the previous kind of segment was, if you like it, right, that's enough. And sometimes I feel, especially in the world of projection, it's easy to get caught up in the right way or the correct way, or it has to be done this way. And if you're not having fun the right way, are you really having fun? I think we need to be much more accepting of the fact that I personally, and this is not an Epson thing, this is just me personally, I want more people to experience projection because it has completely changed what I think viewing content at home is all about. It's such an amazing experience. The reflective nature versus the emissive nature of TV, I think, is more pleasant. Obviously, size is more immersive. And so I'm willing to forego any of the formalities or previous kind of gates that prevented the layperson from getting into projection.
Rob, I love you said that. That disease that plagues video also plagues audio, maybe even worse. So, if you're not the right way, are you having fun?
I think it does.
You shouldn't buy this speaker. It doesn't fit right.
Right. And I think if it looks good, it sounds good, you're enjoying it, then you have a good system. And don't let anyone tell you that you're doing it wrong. Your fun isn't correct.
Because at some point you're not in the hobby to enjoy it. You're in the hobby to just have something to do and debate it and argue about it. You know what I mean?
Right. And that can be fun as well, but only if we all recognize that that's what we're doing.
Cool. All right. Well, we have exhausted our time. So to be respectful for your time, Rob, I know you're on the road right now. Thank you for joining us. It is a pleasure to have you on the show. And I hope to have you on again, and I hope that one day we can create some content at your place and you can tell us all about, your projectors a little more in depth, right, from a product perspective. So that would be cool. But again, thank you for joining us.
It was absolutely my pleasure. I would love to be back anytime. You just let me know and I'll be there.
Right on.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Yep. Everybody else out there, all your viewers, thank you. I know your time is precious too, so I appreciate you coming and spending it with us. And we're going to go ahead and close it out. Don, bless your heart, man. Thank you for coming. Love it.
Yeah. Glad to be here, man. Yeah. Glad to be here.
All right, everybody. That's it. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.